and songbird. Among zookeepers, Goliath's death is famous. He was a bull-elephant seal, a great big venerable beast of 2 tons, star of his European zoo, loved by all visitors. He died of internal bleeding after someone fed him a broken beer bottle. The cruelty is more often active and direct. The literature contains reports on the many torments inflicted upon zoo animals. A shoebill dying of shock after having its beak smashed with a hammer. A moose stag losing its beard along with a strip of flesh the size of an index finger to a visitor's knife. This same moose was poisoned 6 months later. A monkey's arm broken after reaching out for proffered nuts. A deer's antlers attacked with a hacksaw. A zebra stabbed with a sword. And other assaults on other animals with walking sticks, umbrellas, hairpins, knitting needles, scissors, and whatnot, often with an aim toward taking an eye out or to injuring sexual parts. Animals are also poisoned, and there are indecencies even more bizarre. Onanists breaking a sweat on monkeys, ponies, birds, a religious freak who cut a snake's head off, a deranged man who took to urinating in an elk's mouth. At Pondicherry, we were relatively fortunate. We were spared the sadists who plied European and American zoos. Nonetheless, our golden agouti vanished, stolen by someone who ate it, Father suspected. Various birds, pheasants, peacocks, macaws, lost feathers to people greedy for their beauty. We caught a man with a knife climbing into the pen for mouse deer. He said he was going to punish evil Ravana, who in the Ramayana took the form of a deer when he kidnapped Sita, Rama's consort. Another man was nabbed in the process of stealing a cobra. He was a snake charmer whose own snake had died. Both were saved, the cobra from a life of servitude and bad music, and the man from a possible death bite. We had to deal on occasion with stone throwers who found the animals too placid and wanted a reaction. And we had the lady whose sari was caught by a lion. She spun like a yo-yo, choosing mortal embarrassment over mortal end. The thing was, it wasn't even an accident. She had leaned over, thrust her hand in the cage, and waved the end of her sari in the lion's face, with what intent we never figured out. She was not injured. There were many fascinated men who came to her assistance. Her flustered explanation to Father was, "Who ever heard of a lion eating a cotton sari? I thought lions were carnivores." Our worst troublemakers were the visitors who gave food to the animals. Despite our vigilance, Dr. Attal, the zoo veterinarian, could tell by the number of animals with digestive disturbances which had been the busy days at the zoo. He called tidbititis the cases of enteritis and gastritis due to too many carbohydrates, especially sugar. Sometimes we wished people had stuck to sweets. People have a notion that animals can eat anything without the least consequence to their health. Not so. One of our sloth bears became seriously ill with severe hemorrhagic enteritis after being given fish that had gone putrid by a man who was convinced he was doing a good deed. Just beyond the ticket booth, Father had painted on a wall in bright red letters the question, "Do you know which is the most dangerous animal in the zoo?" An arrow pointed to a small curtain. There were so many eager, curious hands that pulled at the curtain that we had to replace it regularly. Behind it was a mirror. But I learned at my expense that Father believed there was another animal even more dangerous than us, and one that was extremely common, too, found on every continent, in every habitat. The redoubtable species Animalus anthropomorphicus, the animal as seen through human eyes. We've all met one, perhaps even owned one. It is an animal that is cute, friendly, loving, devoted, merry, understanding. These animals lie in ambush in every toy store and children's zoo. Countless stories are told of them. They are the pendants of those vicious, bloodthirsty, depraved animals that inflame the ire of the maniacs I have just mentioned, who vent their spite on them with walking sticks and umbrellas. In both cases, we look at an animal and see a mirror. The obsession with putting ourselves at the center of everything is the bane not only of theologians, but also of zoologists. I learned the lesson that an animal is an animal, essentially and practically removed from us, twice, once with Father and once with Richard Parker. It was on a Sunday morning. I was quietly playing on my own. Father called out, "Children, come here." Something was wrong. His tone of voice set off a small alarm bell in my head. I quickly reviewed my conscience. It was clear. Ravi must be in trouble again. I wondered what he had done this time. I walked into the living room. Mother was there. That was unusual. The disciplining of children, like the tending of animals, was generally left to Father. Ravi walked in last, guilt written all over his criminal face. "Ravi, Piscine, I have a very important lesson for you today." "Oh, really, is this necessary?" interrupted Mother. Her face was flushed. I swallowed. If Mother, normally so unruffled, so calm, was worried, even upset, it meant we were in serious trouble. I exchanged glances with Ravi. "Yes, it is," said Father, annoyed. "It may very well save their lives." Save our lives? It was no longer a small alarm bell that was ringing in my head. They were big bells now, like the ones we heard from Sacred Heart of Jesus Church, not far from the zoo. "But Piscine, he's only 8, Mother insisted. "He's the one who worries me the most." "I'm innocent," I burst out. "It's Ravi's fault. Whatever it is, he did it." "What?" said Ravi. "I haven't done anything wrong." He gave me the evil eye. "Shush," said Father, raising his hand. He was looking at Mother. "Gita, you've seen Piscine. He's at that age when boys run around and poke their noses everywhere." "Me? A run-arounder? An everywhere nose poker? Not so, not so. Defend me, Mother. Defend me, I implored in my heart. But she only sighed and nodded, a signal that the terrible business could proceed. "Come with me," said Father. We set out, like prisoners off to their execution. We left the house, went through the gate, entered the zoo. It was early, and the zoo hadn't opened yet to the public. Animal keepers and groundskeepers were going about their work. I noticed Sitaram, who oversaw the orangutans, my favorite keeper. He paused to watch us go by. We passed birds, bears, apes, monkeys, ungulates, the terrarium house, the rhinos, the elephants, the giraffes. We came to the big cats, our tigers, lions, and leopards. Babu, their keeper, was waiting for us. We went round and down the path, and he unlocked the door to the cat house, which was at the center of a moated island. We entered. It was a vast and dim cement cavern, circular in shape, warm and humid and smelling of cat urine. All around were great big cages divided up by thick green iron bars. A yellowish light filtered down from the skylights. Through the cage exits, we could see the vegetation of the surrounding island, flooded with sunlight. The cages were empty, save one. Mahisha, our Bengal tiger patriarch, a lanky, hulking beast of 550 pounds, had been detained. As soon as we stepped in, he loped up to the bars of his cage and set off a full-throated snarl, ears flat against his skull and round eyes fixed on Babu. The sound was so loud and fierce it seemed to shake the whole cat house. My knees started quaking. I got close to Mother. She was trembling too. Even Father seemed to pause and steady himself. Only Babu was indifferent to the outburst and to the searing stare that bored into him like a drill. He had a tested trust in iron bars. Mahisha started pacing to and fro against the limits of his cage. Father turned to us. "What animal is this?" he bellowed above Mahisha's snarling. "It's a tiger," Ravi and I answered in unison, obediently pointing out the blindingly obvious. "Are tigers dangerous?" "Yes, Father, tigers are dangerous." "Tigers are very dangerous," Father shouted. "I want you to understand that you are never, under any circumstances, to touch a tiger, to pet a tiger, to put your hands through the bars of a cage, even to get close to a cage. Is that clear? Ravi?" Ravi nodded vigorously. "Piscine?" I nodded even more vigorously. He kept his eyes on me. I nodded so hard I'm surprised my neck didn't snap and my head fall to the floor. I would like to say in my own defense that though I may have anthropomorphized the animals till they spoke fluent English, the pheasants complaining in uppity British accents of their tea being cold, and the baboons planning their bank robbery getaway in the flat, menacing tones of American gangsters, the fancy was always conscious. I quite deliberately dressed wild animals in tame costumes of my imagination, but I never deluded myself as to the real nature of my playmates. My poking nose had more sense than that. I don't know where Father got the idea that his youngest son was itching to step into a cage with a ferocious carnivore. But wherever the strange worry came from, and Father was a warrior, he was clearly determined to rid himself of it that very morning. "I'm going to show you how dangerous tigers are," he continued. "I want you to remember this lesson for the rest of your lives." He turned to Babu and nodded. Babu left. Mahisha's eyes followed him and did not move from the door he disappeared through. He returned a few seconds later, carrying a goat with its legs tied. Mother gripped me from behind. Mahisha's snarl turned into a growl deep in the throat. Babu unlocked, opened, entered, closed, and locked a cage next to the tiger's cage. Bars and a trap door separated the two. Immediately, Mahisha was up against the dividing bars, pawing them. To his growling, he now added explosive, arrested woofs. Babu placed the goat on the floor. Its flanks were heaving violently. Its tongue hung from its mouth, and its eyes were spinning orbs. He untied its legs. The goat got to its feet. Babu exited the cage in the same careful way he had entered it. The cage had 2 floors, one level with us, the other at the back, higher by about 3 feet, that led outside to the island. The goat scrambled to this second level. Mahisha, now unconcerned with Babu, paralleled the move in his cage in a fluid, effortless motion. He crouched and lay still, his slowly moving tail the only sign of tension. Babu stepped up to the trap door between the cages and started pulling it open. In anticipation of satisfaction, Mahisha fell silent. I heard 2 things at that moment. Father saying, "Never forget this lesson," as he looked on grimly, and the bleating of the goat. It must have been bleating all along, only we couldn't hear it before. I could feel Mother's hand pressed against my pounding heart. The trap door resisted with sharp cries. Mahisha was beside himself. He looked as if he were about to burst through the bars. He seemed to hesitate between staying where he was, at the place where his prey was closest but most certainly out of reach, and moving to the ground level, further away but where the trap door was located. He raised himself and started snarling again. The goat started to jump. It jumped to amazing heights. I had no idea a goat could jump so high. But the back of the cage was a high and smooth cement wall. With sudden ease, the trap door slid open. Silence fell again, except for bleating and the click-click of the goat's hooves against the floor. A streak of black and orange flowed from one cage to the next. Normally, the big cats were not given food 1 day a week to simulate conditions in the wild. We found out later that Father had ordered that Mahisha not be fed for 3 days. I don't know if I saw blood before turning into Mother's arms, or if I daubed it on later in my memory with a big brush. But I heard. It was enough to scare the living vegetarian daylights out of me. Mother bundled us out. We were in hysterics. She was incensed. "How could you, Santosh? They're children. They'll be scarred for the rest of their lives." Her voice was hot and tremulous. I could see she had tears in her eyes. I felt better. "Gita, my bird, it's for their sake." What if Piscine had stuck his hand through the bars of the cage one day to touch the pretty orange fur? Better a goat than him, no? His voice was soft, nearly a whisper. He looked contrite. He never called her my bird in front of us. We were huddled around her. He joined us. But the lesson was not over, though it was gentler after that. Father led us to the lions and leopards. Once there was a madman in Australia who was a black belt in karate. He wanted to prove himself against the lions. He lost. Badly. The keepers found only half his body in the morning. Yes, Father. The Himalayan bears and the sloth bears. One strike of the claws from these cuddly creatures, and your innards will be scooped out and splattered all over the ground. Yes, Father. The hippos. With those soft, flabby mouths of theirs, they'll crush your body to a bloody pulp. On land, they can outrun you. Yes, Father. The hyenas. The strongest jaws in nature. Don't think that they're cowardly or that they only eat carrion. They're not, and they don't. They'll start eating you while you're still alive. Yes, Father. The orangutans. As strong as 10 men. They'll break your bones as if they were twigs. I know some of them were once pets and you played with them when they were small, but now they're grown up and wild and unpredictable. Yes, Father. The ostrich. Looks flustered and silly, doesn't it? Listen up. It's one of the most dangerous animals in a zoo. Just one kick and your back is broken, or your torso is crushed. Yes, Father. The spotted deer. So pretty, aren't they? If the male feels he has to, he'll charge you, and those short little antlers will pierce you like daggers. Yes, Father. The Arabian camel. One slobbering bite, and you've lost a chunk of flesh. Yes, Father. The black swans. With their beaks, they'll crack your skull. With their wings, they'll break your arms. Yes, Father. The smaller birds. They'll cut through your fingers with their beaks as if they were butter. Yes, Father. The elephants. The most dangerous animal of all. More keepers and visitors are killed by elephants than by any other animal in a zoo. A young elephant will most likely dismember you and trample your body parts flat. That's what happened to one poor lost soul in a European zoo who got into the elephant house through a window. An older, more patient animal will squeeze you against a wall or sit on you. Sounds funny, but think about it. Yes, Father. There are animals we haven't stopped by. Don't think they're harmless. Life will defend itself no matter how small it is. Every animal is ferocious and dangerous. It may not kill you, but it will certainly injure you. It will scratch you and bite you, and you can look forward to a swollen, pus-filled infection, a high fever, and a 10-day stay in the hospital. Yes, Father. We came to the guinea pigs, the only other animals besides Mahisha to have been starved at Father's orders, having been denied their previous evening's meal. Father unlocked the cage. He brought out a bag of feed from his pocket and emptied it on the floor. You see these guinea pigs? Yes, Father. The creatures were trembling with weakness as they frantically nibbled their kernels of corn. Well, he leaned down and scooped one up. They're not dangerous. The other guinea pigs scattered instantly. Father laughed. He handed me the squealing guinea pig. He meant to end on a light note. The guinea pig rested in my arms tensely. It was a young one. I went to the cage and carefully lowered it to the floor. It rushed to its mother's side. The only reason these guinea pigs weren't dangerous, didn't draw blood with their teeth and claws, was that they were practically domesticated. Otherwise, to grab a wild guinea pig with your bare hands would be like taking hold of a knife by the blade. The lesson was over. Ravi and I sulked and gave Father the cold shoulder for a week. Mother ignored him too. When I went by the rhinoceros pit, I fancied the rhinos' heads were hung low with sadness over the loss of one of their dear companions. But what can you do when you love your father? Life goes on, and you don't touch tigers. Except that now, for having accused Ravi of an unspecified crime he hadn't committed, I was as good as dead. In years subsequent, when he was in the mood to terrorize me, he would whisper to me, "Just wait till we're alone." You're the next goat. Chapter 9. Getting animals used to the presence of humans is at the heart of the art and science of zookeeping. The key aim is to diminish an animal's flight distance, which is the minimum distance at which an animal wants to keep a perceived enemy. A flamingo in the wild won't mind you if you stay more than 300 yards away. Cross that limit and it becomes tense. Get even closer and you trigger a flight reaction from which the bird will not cease until the 300-yard limit is set again, or until heart and lungs fail. Different animals have different flight distances, and they gauge them in different ways. Cats look, deer listen, bears smell. Giraffes will allow you to come to within 30 yards of them if you're in a motor car, but will run if you are 150 yards away on foot. Fiddler crabs scurry when you're 10 yards away. Howler monkeys stir in their branches when you're at 20. African buffaloes react at 75. Our tools for diminishing flight distance are the knowledge we have of an animal, the food and shelter we provide, the protection we afford. When it works, the result is an emotionally stable, stress-free wild animal that not only stays put, but is healthy, lives a very long time, eats without fuss, behaves and socializes in natural ways, and, the best sign, reproduces. I won't say that our zoo compared to the zoos of San Diego or Toronto or Berlin or Singapore, but you can't keep a good zookeeper down. Father was a natural. He made up for a lack of formal training with an intuitive gift and a keen eye. He had a knack for looking at an animal and guessing what was on its mind. He was attentive to his charges, and they, in return, multiplied, some to excess. Chapter 10. Yet there will always be animals that seek to escape from zoos. Animals that are kept in unsuitable enclosures are the most obvious example. Every animal has particular habitat needs that must be met. If its enclosure is too sunny or too wet or too empty, if its perch is too high or too exposed, if the ground is too sandy, if there are too few branches to make a nest, if the food trough is too low, if there is not enough mud to wallow in, and so many other ifs, then the animal will not be at peace. It is not so much a question of constructing an imitation of conditions in the wild as of getting to the essence of these conditions. Everything in an enclosure must be just right. In other words, within the limits of the animal's capacity to adapt. A plague upon bad zoos with bad enclosures. They bring all zoos into disrepute. Wild animals that are captured when they are fully mature are another example of escape-prone animals. Often, they are too set in their ways to reconstruct their subjective worlds and adapt to a new environment. But even animals that were bred in zoos and have never known the wild, that are perfectly adapted to their enclosures and feel no tension in the presence of humans, will have moments of excitement that push them to seek to escape. All living things contain a measure of madness that moves them in strange, sometimes inexplicable ways. This madness can be saving. It is part and parcel of the ability to adapt. Without it, no species would survive. Whatever the reason for wanting to escape, sane or insane, zoo detractors should realize that animals don't escape to somewhere, but from something. Something within their territory has frightened them. The intrusion of an enemy, the assault of a dominant animal, a startling noise, and set off a flight reaction. The animal flees, or tries to. I was surprised to read at the Toronto Zoo, a very fine zoo, I might add, that leopards can jump 18 feet straight up. Our leopard enclosure in Pondicherry had a wall 16 feet high at the back. I surmise that Rosie and Copycat never jumped out, not because of constitutional weakness, but simply because they had no reason to. Animals that escape go from the known into the unknown, and if there is one thing an animal hates above all else, it is the unknown. Escaping animals usually hide in the very first place they find that gives them a sense of security, and they are dangerous only to those who happen to get between them and their reckoned safe spot. Chapter 11. Consider the case of the female black leopard that escaped from the Zurich Zoo in the winter of 1933. She was new to the zoo and seemed to get along with the male leopard. But various paw injuries hinted at matrimonial strife. Before any decision could be taken about what to do, she squeezed through a break in the roof bars of her cage and vanished in the night. The discovery that a wild carnivore was free in their midst created an uproar among the citizens of Zurich. Traps were set and hunting dogs were let loose. They only rid the canton of its few half-wild dogs. Not a trace of the leopard was found for 10 weeks. Finally, a casual laborer came upon it under a barn 25 miles away and shot it. Remains of roe deer were found nearby. That a big, black, tropical cat managed to survive for more than 2 months in a Swiss winter without being seen by anyone, let alone attacking anyone, speaks plainly to the fact that escaped zoo animals are not dangerous absconding criminals, but simply wild creatures seeking to fit in. And this case is just one among many. If you took the city of Tokyo and turned it upside down and shook it, you would be amazed at the animals that would fall out. It would pour more than cats and dogs, I tell you. Boa constrictors, Komodo dragons, crocodiles, piranhas, ostriches, wolves, lynx, wallabies, manatees, porcupines, orangutans, wild boar. That's the sort of rainfall you could expect on your umbrella. And they expected to find, in the middle of a Mexican tropical jungle, imagine. It's laughable, simply laughable. What were they thinking? Chapter 12.
At times he gets agitated. It's nothing, I say. I say very little. It's his own story that does it. Memory is an ocean, and he bobs on its surface. I worry that he'll want to stop. But he wants to tell me his story. He goes on. After all these years, Richard Parker still preys on his mind. He's a sweet man. Every time I visit, he prepares a South Indian vegetarian feast. I told him I like spicy food. I don't know why I said such a stupid thing. It's a complete lie. I add dollop of yogurt after dollop of yogurt. Nothing doing. Each time it's the same. My taste buds shrivel up and die. My skin goes beet red, my eyes well up with tears, my head feels like a house on fire, and my digestive tract starts to twist and groan in agony like a boa constrictor that has swallowed a lawnmower.
Chapter 13. So you see, if you fall into a lion's pit, the reason the lion will tear you to pieces is not because it's hungry. Be assured, zoo animals are amply fed, or because it's bloodthirsty, but because you've invaded its territory. As an aside, that is why a circus trainer must always enter the lion ring first and in full sight of the lions. In doing so, he establishes that the ring is his territory, not theirs, a notion that he reinforces by shouting, by stomping about, by snapping his whip. The lions are impressed. Their disadvantage weighs heavily on them. Notice how they come in, mighty predators though they are. King of beasts, they crawl in with their tails low, and they keep to the edges of the ring, which is always round, so that they have nowhere to hide. They are in the presence of a strongly dominant male, a super alpha male, and they must submit to his dominance rituals. So they open their jaws wide, they sit up, they jump through paper-covered hoops, they crawl through tubes, they walk backwards, they roll over. He's a queer one, they think dimly. Never seen a top lion like him, but he runs a good pride. The larder's always full, and, let's be honest, mates, his antics keep us busy. Napping all the time does get a bit boring. At least we're not riding bicycles like the brown bears, or catching flying plates like the chimps. Only the trainer better make sure he always remains super alpha. He will pay dearly if he unwittingly slips to beta. Much hostile and aggressive behavior among animals is the expression of social insecurity. The animal in front of you must know where it stands, whether above you or below you. Social rank is central to how it leads its life. Rank determines whom it can associate with and how, where and when it can eat, where it can rest, where it can drink, and so on. Until it knows its rank for certain, the animal lives a life of unbearable anarchy. It remains nervous, jumpy, dangerous. Luckily for the circus trainer, decisions about social rank among higher animals are not always based on brute force. Heidegger, 1950, says, "When two creatures meet, the one that is able to intimidate its opponent is recognized as socially superior, so that a social decision does not always depend on a fight. An encounter, in some circumstances, may be enough." Words of a wise animal man. Mr. Heidegger was, for many years, a zoo director, first of the Basel Zoo and then of the Zurich Zoo. He was a man well versed in the ways of animals. It's a question of brain over brawn. The nature of the circus trainer's ascendancy is psychological. Foreign surroundings, the trainer's erect posture, calm demeanor, steady gaze, fearless step forward, strange roar, for example, the snapping of a whip or the blowing of a whistle, these are so many factors that will fill the animal's mind with doubt and fear, and make clear to it where it stands, the very thing it wants to know. Satisfied, number 2 will back down, and number 1 can turn to the audience and shout, "Let the show go on! And now, ladies and gentlemen, through hoops of real fire..." Chapter 14. It is interesting to note that the lion that is the most amenable to the circus trainer's tricks is the one with the lowest social standing in the pride, the omega animal. It has the most to gain from a close relationship with the super alpha trainer. It is not only a matter of extra treats. A close relationship will also mean protection from the other members of the pride. It is this compliant animal, to the public no different from the others in size and apparent ferocity, that will be the star of the show, while the trainer leaves the beta and gamma lions, more cantankerous subordinates, sitting on their colorful barrels on the edge of the ring. The same is true of other circus animals and is also seen in zoos. Socially inferior animals are the ones that make the most strenuous, resourceful efforts to get to know their keepers. They prove to be the ones most faithful to them, most in need of their company, least likely to challenge them or be difficult. The phenomenon has been observed with big cats, bison, deer, wild sheep, monkeys, and many other animals. It is a fact commonly known in the trade. Chapter 15.
His house is a temple. In the entrance hall hangs a framed picture of Ganesha, he of the elephant head. He sits facing out, rosy-colored, pot-bellied, crowned and smiling, 3 hands holding various objects, the 4th held palm out in blessing and in greeting. He is the Lord overcomer of obstacles, the god of good luck, the god of wisdom, the patron of learning. Simpatico in the highest. He brings a smile to my lips. At his feet is an attentive rat, his vehicle. Because when Lord Ganesha travels, he travels atop a rat. On the wall opposite the picture is a plain wooden cross. In the living room, on a table next to the sofa, there is a small framed picture of the Virgin Mary of Guadalupe, flowers tumbling from her open mantle. Next to it is a framed photo of the black-robed Kaaba, holiest sanctum of Islam, surrounded by a 10,000-fold swirl of the faithful. On the television set is a brass statue of Shiva as Nataraja, the cosmic lord of the dance who controls the motions of the universe and the flow of time. He dances on the demon of ignorance, his 4 arms held out in choreographic gesture, 1 foot on the demon's back, the other lifted in the air. When Nataraja brings this foot down, they say time will stop. There is a shrine in the kitchen. It is set in a cupboard whose door he has replaced with a fretwork arch. The arch partly hides the yellow light bulb that in the evenings lights up the shrine. 2 pictures rest behind a small altar. To the side, Ganesha again, and in the center, in a larger frame, smiling and blue-skinned, Krishna playing the flute. Both have smears of red and yellow powder on the glass over their foreheads. In a copper dish on the altar are 3 silver murtis, representations. He identifies them for me with a pointed finger. Lakshmi, Shakti, the mother goddess in the form of Parvati and Krishna, this time as a playful baby crawling on all fours. In between the goddesses is a stone Shiva Yoni Linga, which looks like half an avocado with a phallic stump rising from its center, a Hindu symbol representing the male and female energies of the universe. To one side of the dish is a small conch shell, set on a pedestal. To the other, a small silver handbell. Grains of rice lie about, as well as a flower just beginning to wilt. Many of these items are anointed with dabs of yellow and red. On the shelf below are various articles of devotion, a beaker full of water, a copper spoon, a lamp with a wick coiled in oil, sticks of incense, and small bowls full of red powder, yellow powder, grains of rice, and lumps of sugar. There is another Virgin Mary in the dining room. Upstairs in his office there is a brass Ganesha sitting cross-legged next to the computer, a wooden Christ on the cross from Brazil on a wall, and a green prayer rug in a corner. The Christ is expressive. He suffers. The prayer rug lies in its own clear space. Next to it on a low bookstand is a book covered by a cloth. At the center of the cloth is a single Arabic word, intricately woven, 4 letters, an aleph, 2 lams, and a ha, the word God in Arabic. The book on the bedside table is a Bible.
Chapter 16. We are all born like Catholics, aren't we? In limbo, without religion, until some figure introduces us to God. After that meeting, the matter ends for most of us. If there is a change, it is usually for the lesser rather than the greater. Many people seem to lose God along life's way. That was not my case. The figure in question for me was an older sister of mother's, of a more traditional mind, who brought me to a temple when I was a small baby. Auntie Rohini was delighted to meet her newborn nephew, and she thought she would include Mother Goddess in the delight. "It will be his symbolic first outing," she said. "It's a samskara." Symbolic indeed. We were in Madurai. I was the fresh veteran of a 7-hour train journey. No matter. Off we went on this Hindu rite of passage, Mother carrying me, Auntie propelling her. I have no conscious memory of this first go-around in a temple, but some smell of incense, some play of light and shadow, some flame, some burst of color, something of the sultriness and mystery of the place must have stayed with me. A germ of religious exultation, no bigger than a mustard seed, was sown in me and left to germinate. It has never stopped growing since that day. I am a Hindu because of sculptured cones of red kumkum powder and baskets of yellow turmeric nuggets, because of garlands of flowers and pieces of broken coconut, because of the clanging of bells to announce one's arrival to God, because of the whine of the reedy nadaswaram and the beating of drums, because of the patter of bare feet against stone floors, down dark corridors pierced by shafts of sunlight, because of the fragrance of incense, because of flames of arati lamps circling in the darkness, because of bhajans being sweetly sung, because of elephants standing around to bless, because of colorful murals telling colorful stories, because of foreheads carrying variously signified the same word, faith. I became loyal to these sense impressions even before I knew what they meant or what they were for. It is my heart that commands me so. I feel at home in a Hindu temple. I am aware of presence, not personal, the way we usually feel presence, but something larger. My heart still skips a beat when I catch sight of the Murti, of God residing in the inner sanctum of a temple. Truly, I am in a sacred cosmic womb, a place where everything is born, and it is my sweet luck to behold its living core. My hands naturally come together in reverent worship. I hunger for prasad, that sugary offering to God that comes back to us as a sanctified treat. My palms need to feel the heat of a hallowed flame, whose blessing I bring to my eyes and forehead. But religion is more than rite and ritual. There is what the rite and ritual stand for. Here too I am a Hindu. The universe makes sense to me through Hindu eyes. There is Brahman, the world soul, the sustaining frame upon which is woven, warp and weft, the cloth of being, with all its decorative elements of space and time. There is Brahman Nirguna, without qualities, which lies beyond understanding, beyond description, beyond approach. With our poor words we sew a suit for it. One, truth, unity, absolute, ultimate reality, ground of being, and try to make it fit. But Brahman Nirguna always bursts the seams. We are left speechless. But there is also Brahman Saguna, with qualities, where the suit fits. Now we call it Shiva, Krishna, Shakti, Ganesha. We can approach it with some understanding. We can discern certain attributes, loving, merciful, frightening, and we feel the gentle pull of relationship. Brahman Saguna is Brahman made manifest to our limited senses. Brahman expressed not only in gods, but in humans, animals, trees, in a handful of earth, for everything has a trace of the divine in it. The truth of life is that Brahman is no different from Atman, the spiritual force within us, what you might call the soul. The individual soul touches upon the world soul like a well reaches for the water table. That which sustains the universe beyond thought and language, and that which is at the core of us and struggles for expression, is the same thing. The finite within the infinite within the finite. If you ask me how Brahman and Atman relate precisely, I would say in the same way the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit relate, mysteriously. But one thing is clear. Atman seeks to realize Brahman, to be united with the Absolute, and it travels in this life on a pilgrimage where it is born and dies, and is born again and dies again, and again and again, until it manages to shed the sheaths that imprison it here below. The paths to liberation are numerous, but the bank along the way is always the same, the bank of karma, where the liberation account of each of us is credited or debited, depending on our actions. This, in a holy nutshell, is Hinduism, and I have been a Hindu all my life. With its notions in mind, I see my place in the universe. But we should not cling, a plague upon fundamentalists and literalists. I am reminded of a story of Lord Krishna when he was a cowherd. Every night, he invites the milkmaids to dance with him in the forest. They come and they dance. The night is dark, the fire in their midst roars and crackles, the beat of the music gets ever faster. The girls dance and dance and dance with their sweet lord, who has made himself so abundant as to be in the arms of each and every girl. But the moment the girls become possessive, the moment each one imagines that Krishna is her partner alone, he vanishes. So it is that we should not be jealous with God. I know a woman here in Toronto who is very dear to my heart. She was my foster mother. I call her Auntie G, and she likes that. She is Quebecois. Though she has lived in Toronto for over 30 years, her French-speaking mind still slips on occasion on the understanding of English sounds. And so, when she first heard of Hare Krishnas, she didn't hear right. She heard hairless Christians, and that is what they were to her for many years. When I corrected her, I told her that in fact she was not so wrong, that Hindus, in their capacity for love, are indeed hairless Christians, just as Muslims, in the way they see God in everything, are bearded Hindus, and Christians, in their devotion to God, are hat-wearing Muslims. Chapter 17. First wonder goes deepest. Wonder after that fits in the impression made by the first. I owe to Hinduism the original landscape of my religious imagination, those towns and rivers, battlefields and forests, holy mountains and deep seas where gods, saints, villains, and ordinary people rub shoulders, and in doing so define who and why we are. I first heard of the tremendous cosmic might of loving kindness in this Hindu land. It was Lord Krishna speaking. I heard him, and I followed him. And in his wisdom and perfect love, Lord Krishna led me to meet one man. I was 14 years old and a well-content Hindu when I met Jesus Christ on a holiday. It was not often that Father took time off from the zoo, but one of the times he did, we went to Munnar, just over in Kerala. Munnar is a small hill station surrounded by some of the highest tea estates in the world. It was early May, and the monsoon hadn't come yet. The plains of Tamil Nadu were beastly hot. We made it to Munnar after a winding 5-hour car ride from Madurai. The coolness was as pleasing as having mint in your mouth. We did the tourist thing. We visited a Tata tea factory. We enjoyed a boat ride on a lake. We toured a cattle breeding center. We fed salt to some Nilgiri tars, a species of wild goat in a national park. "We have some in our zoo. You should come to Pondicherry," said Father to some Swiss tourists. Ravi and I went for walks in the tea estates near town. It was all an excuse to keep our lethargy a little busy. By late afternoon, Father and Mother were as settled in the tea room of our comfortable hotel as two cats sunning themselves at a window. Mother read, while Father chatted with fellow guests. There are 3 hills within Munnar. They don't bear comparison with the tall hills, mountains you might call them, that surround the town, but I noticed the first morning, as we were having breakfast, that they did stand out in one way. On each stood a god house. The hill on the right, across the river from the hotel, had a Hindu temple high on its side. The hill in the middle, further away, held up a mosque, while the hill on the left was crowned with a Christian church. On our 4th day in Munnar, as the afternoon was coming to an end, I stood on the hill on the left. Despite attending a nominally Christian school, I had not yet been inside a church, and I wasn't about to dare the deed now. I knew very little about the religion. It had a reputation for few gods and great violence, but good schools. I walked around the church. It was a building unremittingly unrevealing of what it held inside, with thick, featureless walls, pale blue in color, and high, narrow windows, impossible to look in through. A fortress. I came upon the rectory. The door was open. I hid around a corner to look upon the scene. To the left of the door was a small board with the words Parish Priest and Assistant Priest on it. Next to each was a small sliding block. Both the priest and his assistant were in, the board informed me in gold letters, which I could plainly see. One priest was working in his office, his back turned to the bay windows, while the other was seated on a bench at a round table in the large vestibule that evidently functioned as a room for receiving visitors. He sat facing the door and the windows, a book in his hands, a Bible, I presumed. He read a little, looked up, read a little more, looked up again. It was done in a way that was leisurely, yet alert and composed. After some minutes, he closed the book and put it aside. He folded his hands together on the table and sat there, his expression serene, showing neither expectation nor resignation. The vestibule had clean white walls. The table and benches were of dark wood, and the priest was dressed in a white cassock. It was all neat. plain, simple. I was filled with a sense of peace. But more than the setting, what arrested me was my intuitive understanding that he was there, open, patient, in case someone, anyone, should want to talk to him. A problem of the soul, a heaviness of the heart, a darkness of the conscience. He would listen with love. He was a man whose profession it was to love, and he would offer comfort and guidance to the best of his ability. I was moved. What I had before my eyes stole into my heart and thrilled me. He got up. I thought he might slide his block over, but he didn't. He retreated further into the rectory, that's all, leaving the door between the vestibule and the next room as open as the outside door. I noted this, how both doors were wide open. Clearly, he and his colleague were still available. I walked away, and I dared. I entered the church. My stomach was in knots. I was terrified I would meet a Christian who would shout at me, "What are you doing here? How dare you enter this sacred place, you defiler? Get out, right now!" There was no one, and little to be understood. I advanced and observed the inner sanctum. There was a painting. Was this the Murti? Something about a human sacrifice. An angry god who had to be appeased with blood. Dazed women staring up in the air, and fat babies with tiny wings flying about. A charismatic bird. Which one was the god? To the side of the sanctum was a painted wooden sculpture. The victim again, bruised and bleeding in bold colors. I stared at his knees. They were badly scraped. The pink skin was peeled back and looked like the petals of a flower, revealing kneecaps that were fire engine red. It was hard to connect this torture scene with the priest in the rectory. The next day, at around the same time, I let myself in. Catholics have a reputation for severity, for judgment that comes down heavily. My experience with Father Martin was not at all like that. He was very kind. He served me tea and biscuits in a tea set that tinkled and rattled at every touch. He treated me like a grown-up, and he told me a story. Or rather, since Christians are so fond of capital letters, a story. And what a story! The first thing that drew me in was disbelief. What? Humanity sins, but it's God's Son who pays the price? I tried to imagine Father saying to me, "Piscine, a lion slipped into the llama pen today and killed 2 llamas. Yesterday, another one killed a black buck. Last week, 2 of them ate the camel. The week before, it was painted storks and gray herons. And who's to say for sure who snacked on our golden agouti? The situation has become intolerable. Something must be done. I have decided that the only way the lions can atone for their sins is if I feed you to them." "Yes, Father. That would be the right and logical thing to do. Give me a moment to wash up." "Hallelujah, my son." "Hallelujah, Father." What a downright weird story. What peculiar psychology. I asked for another story, one that I might find more satisfying. Surely this religion had more than one story in its bag. Religions abound with stories. But Father Martin made me understand that the stories that came before it, and there were many, were simply prologue to the Christians. Their religion had one story, and to it they came back again and again, over and over. It was story enough for them. I was quiet that evening at the hotel. That a god should put up with adversity, I could understand. The gods of Hinduism faced their fair share of thieves, bullies, kidnappers, and usurpers. What is the Ramayana but the account of one long bad day for Rama? Adversity, yes. Reversals of fortune, yes. Treachery, yes. But humiliation? Death? I couldn't imagine Lord Krishna consenting to be stripped naked, whipped, mocked, dragged through the streets, and to top it off, crucified, and at the hands of mere humans to boot. I'd never heard of a Hindu god dying. Brahman revealed did not go for death. Devils and monsters did, as did mortals, by the thousands and millions. That's what they were there for. Matter, too, fell away. But divinity should not be blighted by death. It's wrong. The world's soul cannot die, even in one contained part of it. It was wrong of this Christian God to let his avatar die. That is tantamount to letting a part of himself die. For if the Son is to die, it cannot be fake. If God on the cross is God shamming a human tragedy, it turns the passion of Christ into the farce of Christ. The death of the Son must be real. Father Martin assured me that it was. But once a dead God, always a dead God, even resurrected. The Son must have the taste of death forever in his mouth. The Trinity must be tainted by it. There must be a certain stench at the right hand of God the Father. The horror must be real. Why would God wish that upon himself? Why not leave death to the mortals? Why make dirty what is beautiful, spoil what is perfect? Love. That was Father Martin's answer. And what about this son's deportment? There is the story of baby Krishna, wrongly accused by his friends of eating a bit of dirt. His foster mother, Yashoda, comes up to him with a wagging finger. "You shouldn't eat dirt, you naughty boy," she scolds him. "But I haven't," says the unchallenged lord of all and everything, in sport disguised as a frightened human child. "Tut, tut, open your mouth," orders Yashoda. Krishna does as he is told. He opens his mouth. Yashoda gasps. She sees in Krishna's mouth the whole, complete, entire, timeless universe. All the stars and planets of space and the distance between them. All the lands and seas of the earth and the life in them. She sees all the days of yesterday and all the days of tomorrow. She sees all ideas and all emotions, all pity and all hope, and the three strands of matter. Not a pebble, candle, creature, village, or galaxy is missing, including herself and every bit of dirt in its truthful place. "My lord, you can close your mouth," she says reverently. There is the story of Vishnu, incarnated as Vamana, the dwarf. He asks of demon king Bali only as much land as he can cover in 3 strides. Bali laughs at this runt of a suitor and his puny request. He consents. Immediately, Vishnu takes on his full cosmic size. With 1 stride he covers the earth. With the 2nd, the heavens, and with the 3rd, he boots Bali into the netherworld. Even Rama, that most human of avatars, who had to be reminded of his divinity when he grew long-faced over the struggle to get Sita, his wife, back from Ravana, evil king of Lanka, was no slouch. No spindly cross would have kept him down. When push came to shove, he transcended his limited human frame with strength no man could have and weapons no man could handle. That is God as God should be, with shine and power and might, such as can rescue and save and put down evil. This son, on the other hand, who goes hungry, who suffers from thirst, who gets tired, who is sad, who is anxious, who is heckled and harassed, who has to put up with followers who don't get it and opponents who don't respect him, what kind of a God is that? It's a God on too human a scale, that's what. There are miracles, yes, mostly of a medical nature. A few to satisfy hungry stomachs. At best, a storm is tempered, water is briefly walked upon. If that is magic, it is minor magic on the order of card tricks. Any Hindu god can do 100 times better. This son is a god who spent most of his time telling stories, talking. This son is a god who walked, a pedestrian god, and in a hot place at that, with a stride like any human stride, the sandal reaching just above the rocks along the way, and when he splurged on transportation, it was a regular donkey. This son is a god who died in 3 hours, with moans, gasps, and laments. What kind of a God is that? What is there to inspire in this sun? Love, said Father Martin.